Um, so some students wonder, like, they start writing this essay, and because we're paying attention to like the rhetorical qualities and things, it starts to sound less like a story and more like an essay. What are some ways we can prevent our story, our narrative, from sounding like an essay? Yes.
You could write a story, not an essay.
Yes, but let's break that down, because sometimes it's like, I feel like I'm trying, and like it just sounds more like one.
Don't use words that you would like use in an essay.
Okay.
Like
So
more like bigger words, I guess, and try to keep it like simple.
yeah, you want to think about like your purpose, right? So like diction would be a part of that. You want to use words that make your audience feel like they're there with you in that moment, that are conveying your purpose. And your purpose is not to analyze or to argue necessarily. You're sort of making an argument that you have a purpose and you're trying to achieve that purpose, but it's a lot more subtle than that. Making sure that you are in the story more than you're talking about what you're thinking in the story, right? We talked about, okay, are you guys okay? Are you dying over there, Sydney? What's going on?
Nothing, they just told me something.
Okay, great. But making sure that like you're not pulling out too much out of the story, that we're in the story with you. It's okay to pull out for like an important moment, right? Maybe towards the end or like a turning point. But then you want to get back in there and not just be like in your head the whole time, because that's not a very interesting story in your head. Also, dialogue can be a great way to keep people in the story and feeling there. That's not going to be in an argumentative essay necessarily. Like dialogue is a great way to move your story along and keep your reader in the moment. Okay. I'm excited to read these. I think you're going to do a great job. And they are due tomorrow. So shoot for at least 3 pages. Try no more than 5. There's a little fudge room on that, but they should not be like 10 plus pages, because that's not very short, is it? Okay? Any other questions on that before we move on? Okay, so now we're going to start talking more about documents and speeches. We're moving away from narrative and fiction and then moving into speeches. You'll be able to use a lot of what we've talked about in our analysis of these documents as well. But there are a few other things that come up in speeches or in the way that they speak, especially in regards to sentence structure, that we'll see a lot more in these documents. On the exam, there's almost always a speech that they give you to analyze. So the last 4 years for sure they had one, and then before that it was pretty often. So you want to be paying attention to what we're doing as we analyze speeches, so that when you get a speech on your exam, you're like, okay, I've seen this before, I know things that I can look for, right? Because part of the exam is like that freak out of like, oh my gosh, what do I do? What do I do? Like I'm sitting here, what can I look for? And so in class, we're not just like doing this to waste your time, but like to make it so that you're so comfortable by the time you get to that exam that you're like, okay, I know I can look for sentence structure. I know that I can look for the rhetorical triangle, and I know how to do that, so that you have something to say. So at the end of like this section of looking at speeches, and then also like seminal documents, so they also want you to look at like historical documents and things like that. You are going to, for like the big assignment, write an analysis of the speech that you choose. And so I want to show you today AmericanRhetoric.com, because it has a lot of good speeches that you can pick from for your choice speech. You don't need to have it annotated or chosen until the 6th of October, but I wanted to give you plenty of time to just let you mull over it, maybe look at a few speeches, and then decide which one you want to do. Some of you may choose to like panic choose anyway the day before, but for those of you who like time to just think about it and mull it over, I wanted to give you that time. So on Canvas, there's a link to AmericanRhetoric.com. This has a lot of different speeches that were given in America. You don't have to pick an American speech, but junior year, like according to the state court, focuses on American Lit. But you can pick something else, but this is just a really easy website to use. But if there's another one you're like, I really want to analyze this one that, some king gave, okay, that's great, I don't care. But pick something that you like, because the process is less painful when you care about something. It may still be a little painful, but less so, right? It's got like the top 100 speeches, right, on here. What do you think the number 1 speech is? Yeah, right, that's like America's speech, right? Any guesses for number 2? JFK's inaugural speech, which I have never actually read, so anyway, I should do some more reading. But they've got a ton of different ones on here that you could look at. I think they have it so like on the sides there's like 9/11 speeches, so you could just like search also for what you care about. So like if you wanted to look at speeches about certain subjects, you could look that up. You could do speeches from movies, although some people have done speeches for movies and they're just too short, right? And there's not a lot going in to them there. So you want to make sure that whatever speech that you're picking, you have enough that you can really dig in and pull things out. I think Mrs. Van Orden said she had people who picked the speech at the end of Legally Blonde, but probably not as much going on there, right? I mean, yeah, and maybe you're excellent at analyzing, but just pick something you can be successful with, right? So don't give yourself too little to work with, because then you'll be panicking as you're writing. You want to pick something else anyway. So, questions on that? I will give you more information about the actual assignment when we get closer to it, but for now, just pick one, and you can start annotating if you want. But again, you have like 2 weeks to do that. Also noteworthy, I'm sure you already heard, but we are not moving to phase 2 until at least the end of quarter 1. We're gonna push that out because of the phase orange announcement by the governor. So just keep that in mind. Cool. Okay. So today we're gonna talk about the Declaration of Independence, which you should have annotated. How many of you did that? Just be honest. All right.
Halfway. Did what?
Cool. Annotated the Declaration of Independence. What I want you to do, this is kind of bad, because then we have nothing to talk about all periods. Like me pulling teeth to get you to see things. And you guys have a freaking week right before I see you. You can get it together for a 4-page document. I don't like to shame you, but like really, this is pathetic. I see you guys at football games. If you can make time for a 4-hour football game, you can make time for your 4-page document for your English class, okay? So what I want you to do is you, in partners, right now, I'm going to give you 15, 20 minutes. You can work on your like Obama speech for getting ahead or whatever. You guys are going to dig into this, and you're going to find freaking things to say in our conversation, or I'm going to have a freak out, okay? So take 20 minutes, start at the beginning, look for the rhetorical choices that the founding fathers, that Thomas Jefferson is making, and then annotate and talk about what it's doing for its purpose, okay? This is my lovely document. Yours should be loaded with stuff. There's plenty to talk about. I need to see everyone working. No cell phone, no giggling. This is not funny. This is our country, okay?
It's a little funny.
And then get it together for next week before I kill Okay, so someone next to you, you are working hard on this right now. Go. Read, get off your phone, or I'm going to freak out. Yes. Yeah, for sure. Which one do you need? Yeah, I think there's an outlet. choices you noticed. If they noticed something that you didn't, add that to your draft, okay? So take 5-10 minutes and talk to them about the choices you've seen made. So just turn to someone next to you. Everyone should find someone to talk to. You can probably do that. Or you can talk to me. Joseph, sorry. Do that.
Well, it's like from the very beginning, he was really
And then move to this desk.
formal wording.
A little closer. Just don't touch each other.
Every single
I know some key things.
And something that's crazy is the amount of attention, like, there's straight up like two things like.
I didn't really like
And yeah, it's literally crazy.
But I guess
It's
people
real,
are
man.
angry at it.
And then also.
But still, I think they should have been more
Oh, yeah, just like.
gracious than that.
And then it's like, yeah, exactly. I understand. Like he's trying to, they're really showing that like they're like, hey, thanks for the Los Angeles thing. No, part of the British Empire.
And like, another pattern I noticed is when they're trying to like
Yeah.
make a
Yeah,
point
we
of
agreed we're going
stuff
for
to
climbing.
me.
Are you excited to read?
Safety
Just this guy.
like the OSU or they have you know, and they're always talking about safety
Every
and
weekend,
and
except
like,
like-
like I think what they're trying to do is say, hey, these are basic human things. And like we don't have that. It's
Okay, let's talk about this document. So before we dig into the choices, let's talk about the rhetorical situation here. And what is the rhetorical situation? Remember what that is? It is the situation and like what is the genesis for whatever the document is, right? Whether it's a speech, it's a memoir, whatever, like there is a purpose and like why they're writing, the context, who they're writing to, so kind of looking at like those context parts and then purpose parts of the rhetorical triangle, right? So what is the purpose of the Declaration of Independence? To declare independence from who? From Britain, right? Looking at this document, it's like they're declaring independence. They have to do it in a way, though, that makes them not look like whiny colonists. Like, Britain's mean to us, right? And like yes, they're gonna list some offenses that Britain has made, but they're trying to become, some, many, right? But they're going to like do it in a way so that people will then take them seriously and not be like, look at them, they're trash, like Britain takes care of them, and they're just like, we don't want to do that anymore, right? They want to be perceived as a nation, right? And so they're going to need to figure that into the way that they write this. Who is their audience? Yes. Okay, so people in America, that is one, there's kind of multi-audiences, so that is definitely one,
I
yes.
think it might be people in Europe to try to convince them that they're not rebelling, they are in
Right.
the right here.
So if they say Britain, we want to break up, what is going to happen? And what does happen?
They want to convince the French and Spanish to help them out.
Yes, right, they need some posse members to help them not get beaten up by their ex-boyfriend, right? Yes.
Because wasn't this like one of many times, like this was like the final time, but haven't they written like multiple things saying like, hey, we don't really like that you're doing this, like, This is kind of rude, so this is the final, like, they're like, you know, like, screw this, like,
We're done.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is kind of like, there's been a lot of things leading up to this, right? We always think of like the Boston Tea Party as being like they were mad about taxing their tea. Well, no, that was just like the final straw. So think about like, you're doing something and then just something happens and it seems very minor in comparison to all the other terrible things and you're like, that's it, like, so I've been trying to get off soda because some of you may remember from your freshman year, I had an addiction to Diet Dr. Pepper. But I was having a rough day and I'm like, that's it, I'm going to Sodalicious and I'm getting my, you know, I can't remember, I think it's called like the Queen or something, but it has like raspberry puree on it, right? So I go to the freaking Sodalicious, it's like the first time in weeks, cause I'm like, that's it. So I go there and they're like, I'm like, can I get, you know, my drink? And they're like, oh yeah, but you know, we're out of raspberry puree. And I was like, ah! Like, and I was like, it's because of freaking COVID. And my husband's like, you don't know that. And the lady's like, no, that's why. And I was just like, that's it, I'm done with this year. Like that, even though it's just raspberry puree, right? It doesn't matter. Like all of the other things in this year that happened, right? Like we had to go online, we couldn't go anywhere, I broke my freaking leg in the middle of summer. Like it was just like this litany. And then like the raspberry puree for me was like the last straw. I was like, and I'm done. I'm just gonna hibernate for the rest of the year. Although I probably can't survive that way. Anyway, so this is kind of the same thing. It's their raspberry puree. The tea is like, that's it. They're taxing our tea and we're done, right? And so they're writing to let Britain know that. That's one of their audiences. They're writing to get people to join them in their cause against Britain. And they're writing to the American colonists because at this point, like you can see right here, it says the unanimous declaration of the 13 united, and united isn't capitalized because right now they're not actually called the United States of America. They're just all of these separate colonies. And so they're trying to get them to be like, yo, we're all together now, like we're all in this, right? Like we need to like buckle up and be together, right? And so part of that is, you know, trying to convince the colonists to join them in their quest against Britain. Okay, so looking at this document, what choices do you notice that Thomas Jefferson, who wrote most of this, is making to accomplish his purpose, right? His purpose of saying, we're done, but in a way that makes them look credible, right? Yes.
Well, right off the bat, it says states, not colonies. So
Okay.
I find that they actually are already independent.
Yeah, and like thinking about states, like we think of states in like, okay, we're just little pockets of the same country, but like a state in this case is, you know, a country, right? Like you think of like, okay, the head of state is like the head of that country, right? And so he's like, no, you're not pathetic little colonies. We are states. We are not a part of Britain anymore, because if we're colonies, then we're like a subset of Britain. But we're just gonna say that we're this now. So that's a great thing to notice. What else? Yeah.
Like it does a lot to unite, like it talks about like mankind or like humankind, like kind of implying like, hey, this goes for like all humans, people on earth, and then it ties a lot back to religion, which at the time held a lot of like political sway.
For sure.
Right? And so like they're tying it back to like, hey, this is like divine right what we're doing, and like that like justifies it in the light of a lot of people by saying like, oh yeah, like I totally agree with this, you know, it's like.
Yeah. So they're kind of working on two fronts here. They're saying, okay, basic human rights. And like human rights is huge. They take out like this, where they say the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in here. They take that, they steal that from a guy named Thomas Paine, who had just written this other document, and he said life, liberty, and property, but the Americans were like, we want something pretty or something, right? So we're gonna put pursuit of happiness, whatever that means, right? And so they're working from kind of like that, you know, everyone has rights. And this goes against, and like you said, they put like all humankind or mankind. And I made, like in my little documents, I like circled where that was happening too. Because they're like, no, this is not us being whiny against like one nation. We are representing all of humanity here, and like, you can't do this to people. But then they also take into account like that religious aspect, right? They talk about divine providence, about how the Creator gives people certain unalienable rights, because God is kind of a big backer. If you can get God on your side, people, if they disagree with you, look like they're with Satan, which would be bad, right? So you gotta get God on your side. because he's got a lot of ethos in that way. He's very convincing during this time. What else? What other choices do you notice? Yeah, Larissa.
When talking about the government, because it says the word government a lot, like, many times, right after that, it used like strong words like destructive, so like to show how bad the government.
Yeah, those loaded words like destructive, abolish it. They talk about like, they're like, here's this government and it's not doing what it's supposed to. And so they're using those loaded words to show that. Hannah?
There's also a lot of repetition when he starts talking about the things that's like happened to him, and like
Yeah.
it's like kind of just, it's like emphasizing it kind of a thing.
For sure. So like down at the bottom of that page says, he has, and then there's some sort of terrible verb, right? Like passive, like he has refused, he has forbidden, he has called, he has dissolved, he has refused, like over and over and over again. And that's a type of sentence repetition. Do you guys know what that particular repetition at the beginning of a sentence is called? This may be new to you. It's called anaphora. So I want you to write that down. In your notes, where you have marked, hopefully, the repetition at the beginning of sentences, you're going to call it anaphora. And what that means is that you're repeating that first part of the sentence over and over again. You will look very smart on your exam if you notice anaphora, right? You're like, oh, I see this repetition over and over and over again. Why do you think he's being so repetitive? And he says he has refused, he has forbidden, and who is he? Okay, King George, right? Like the third or something. One of those numbers. Okay. Why repeat that he has done that? Like, why repeat it all, and then why particularly put the king as the one to blame? So kind of two questions, I guess. Yeah.
Because the king is the one in power and represents Great Britain.
Okay. He's like one person they can identify. Any other thoughts on that? I feel like you've got like a, okay, I can never tell. It's like kind of, I can tell if you're like, yes, over your mask, or, yeah, Larry. Okay, you can borrow my charger over there if you want. Yeah,
Like another thing with the repetition, like saying, okay, these are all the things he's, like, homeboy did us dirty, right? And so like, they're trying to seem like, hey, we're not complaining, like these are actual issues and these are actual things that have happened to us. And the fault is this guy, so he needs to go down, but we should not be part of, we don't affiliate with this terrible man and
Yeah.
oppressing us. in
for
this
sure.
world.
Right, like, they're trying not to be emotional about this, right? It's like, what side of the rhetorical triangle is this list of things?
Logical.
Very logical, right? They're like, now, we're not just being like whiny babies, right? We're being very logical about, now they are using loaded words, right, which is kind of an emotional appeal. But by listing it in this way, it kind of hides that, and it's like, wow, that's a lot of things, and just like sheer numbers. In speeches and in documents, repetition helps you to remember stuff, right? When you think about like the I have a dream speech, and when we analyze it in a few days, you'll see this. You remember it because he's like, I have a dream, over and over and over again. Our attention span's pretty much stuck, as you are aware, I'm sure. Like, we're not very good at remembering things, but if they repeat it over and over again, we're like, that must be important. And it sticks with us, right? And it's like, in this, it does that. It's like, okay, he has, and they're like, oh, the king has done a lot of bad things. Like, we're gonna at least remember that. And then just the sheer number of stuff creates kind of a logical argument. Like, it's not just like the T. It's not about the T, right? It's all the other stuff. Looking at that anaphora, it changes from like he has to for. Why do you think that there's a change there? And then it kind of goes back to more stuff that he's done. Yeah.
They kind of divides it into different sections, because the first is about, well, other stuff in the second section.
Okay, other stuff. So you can create a division there. I think too, I mean, like, he was talking about a bunch of other stuff, but then maybe just breaks it up, like we kind of get numb to the, he has done this, he has, and then we're like, okay, 4, ooh, but still more stuff, right? So it kind of breaks that attention a little bit. What else? What else do you notice going on here? I'm glad that you guys are typing stuff as we're talking. That is good form, students. Yes, Larissa.
It talks about like the House of Representatives a lot.
Okay.
And how it was important to them to have their opinion out there, cause like when the taxes were put for them to pay, like they wanted the approval and like for them to reason it out. And so they're talking about how that wasn't fair to them and how they wanted to have the representation.
Yeah, and they say that they have done a lot of things before that, like we have reminded them, we have appealed them to them, we have warned them, so like we have tried to make our opinion known, and they just like shut us down. We haven't had any way to talk to them about it. He ignores us, right? And so what are we supposed to do?
Yeah, and it also says in one part, we have petitioned in the most humble terms, and so they're trying to show how they thought like their rights were fair
Yeah,
and how they completely ignored it.
for sure. And they're like, we didn't come at them guns blazing, being like, you will listen to us. Like, we were humble. We tried, like, in the avenues that they gave us to work within that, but what they are, like, it's just unreasonable. Like, they're not being reasonable, and what can we do with that? Well, we can't, so we're done. We're breaking up. Any other things that you notice going on? Let's look at the last question. So like the question at the end of your document says, what strikes you as being the most significant rhetorical strategy used in the Declaration of Independence? What did you guys say was, or what, as you're thinking and getting to that point, what would you say is his most important strategy? Yeah, I
No,
don't.
probably that like logic that we were talking about, right? Because it's using these like big boy lists and saying, hey, it's kind of using the formula of like, because of this action, we take this one. It's very logical in the sense that it makes a lot of sense what they're doing, and they're saying, hey, we have every right to do this because it's like the way that we have to because of like logic.
Yeah, I think definitely the side of the rhetorical triangle leans most heavily upon in this is logic. Because even though, yes, they have got those like different appeals, because you'll always have all of the appeals there. By relying most heavily on logic, they are more likely to get people on their side, right? They are more likely to get the European countries to be like, yeah, they actually deserve to be able to do this, and so sure, we'll help you, right? So definitely, if I were writing about this, I would talk about logos, right? And like the different strategies within logos, like that are helping to create that logical appeal. So the repetition of like, here are all these things, and just like a list. That is one way that they're using logic. They're also showing all the ways that they tried, like we talked about. So like, here's all the places that we tried, and they're just not paying attention to us. Any other strategies you would maybe talk about in that paragraph? Yeah, Hannah.
Try and talk about pathos.
Okay.
Because he uses very, very strong words to kind of push the logos more though, so it's like pathos and ambiguous.
Yeah, when is he using words that are most emotionally charged? Yeah.
When he's talking about like this is what they did. Like,
Yeah.
This is how they did after everything.
Yeah, so they're creating kind of this victim persona, right? They're being logical about it, but when they're talking about the wrongs committed against them and against their human rights and things that even God endows people with, right? That's when we see like these emotionally charged words. And so we could talk about how even though he's using logic, this this emotional appeal is important too, because it's creating, okay, this victim, we've been beat up versus Britain. But you could talk about how that's muted by the logical appeals, and that would be a good thing to talk about. Any other ideas? Yeah.
Well, like you can talk about how like ethos along with like your audience, right?
It's where you're portraying yourself in a particular way, and you're thinking about what your audience would care about.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
so like they're kind of portraying like that side of things by like using that humanity aspect by saying, hey, we are all humans, and it kind of unites them in that argument. it makes more people care about it, cause it's like, oh, this is for all of humanity, like it's not
Yeah.
just for like Bimbo Joe in the corner, like this is for humanity and it's important that I listen to this.
Yeah, so they're definitely highlighting that part of themselves, like the part where they've been logical, where they have, like, we all have human rights, and so, like, you know, ethically and, like, reputation-wise, we're good people, and, like, you should join us, because that, you should care about that, being a fellow human. When, readers or speakers or writers try to, like, get you to feel similarities with them, that's called identification in rhetoric, and so you're trying to identify with your audience so that then they feel compelled to agree with you because you're alike in some way. So you'll see people get up and be like, yeah, you know, I've lived here for 20 years and da da da, and like they kind of state like things that are in common with you, right? Because then you're like, oh, yeah, they're like me, and because they're like you, then you care more about what they're saying and you're more likely to agree with them. And so in this way, they're like, we are humans like you, and we have rights like you, and we believe in God like you. They're identifying with their audience in hopes of getting them, like you said, to see themselves in the colonists and what they're doing. I think one other thing that I noticed was the use of pronouns. So we see that it says like he, but then when they talk about the colonies, which pronoun do they use? We and our, right? And so they create this us kind of versus him. And sometimes them, right? Towards the end, they start talking about, okay, Britain, like you have done some things too, right? By not saying anything against the king, you are now complicit in what he's doing. And so he created kind of like this us versus him allows Britain to be like, okay, yeah, we don't have to agree with them, we can agree with the colonists. But also saying, like, by doing nothing, like that's not okay, like you need to do something about it. So that use of pronouns is something that I would perhaps talk about. Questions about the Declaration of Independence. I felt that perhaps important to your interpretation of this document, song from Hamilton. This is their audience, this is the he, right?
You say the price of my love's not a price that you're willing to pay. You cry in your tea, but you hurl in the sea when you see me go by. Why so sad? Remember we made an arrangement when you went away. Now you're making me mad. Remember, despite our estrangement, I'm your man. You'll be back, soon you'll see. You'll remember you belong to me. You'll be back, time will tell. You'll remember that I served you well. Oceans rise, empires fall. We have seen each other through it all. And when push comes to shove, I will send a fully armed battalion to remind you of my love. Da 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 da. You say our love is draining and you can't go on. You'll be the one complaining when I am gone. And now don't change the subject, 'cause you're my favorite subject, my sweet, submissive subject, my loyal, royal subject, forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. You'll be back like before. I will fight the fight and win the war for your love, for your praise, and I'll love you till my dying days. When you're gone, I'll get mad. certain, throw away this thing we have. 'Cause when push comes to shove, I will kill your friends and family to remind you of my love. Da 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 ya da 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 ya da 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 ya da. Everybody.
Document, you know, they're writing against him, right? But they do kind of create a caricature, I can talk, of him, in that they're like, he does all these things, and we don't get to hear his side. He looks like this to the colonists, right? Where he's like, I'm sending these mixed messages, we love you, we'll care for you, but screw you, right? And at the end of the day. And like, I'm like, oh, he just kind of, like, he almost looks crazy from like the way that they're making him sound here. And so, I don't think that they're wrong, obviously, like, I love our country, and I love that they did that, but important to consider when we don't hear that other side, are we missing stuff? Or are they just this, like, cartoony person? Next time, so tomorrow, we will be looking at Obama's 2004 Democratic Republic, or National Convention speech. I can talk. Whatever your political leanings, it is a great speech. Before this, he is unknown. Nobody knows who he is because this is when Kerry is running for president. And so he comes out of the Senate, this unknown guy, and this speech is very powerful and kind of puts him on the national stage for the first time. So we're going to analyze it, see what he's doing, and then next class, so when I see you guys next, you will all do your I Have a Dream speech. Da, 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 da. Okay, questions before you go home? Okay, then I'm going to give you